Awesome. I was in Messenger, but I want to make sure that we are, in fact, live on at least Facebook. Oh, there it is.
I believe we are.
Yeah, it just popped up. It just populated it. All right. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our October Listening Club. I am going to go over just a couple of housekeeping. And then we can get started and talk about the Goat Rodeo Sessions, which is an album that I'm very excited that I got to force you guys to listen to. So, real quick, if you are new here, this is one of the 3 multimedia clubs that we have at the Dragonfly Arts Collective. You can find our Facebook group now at the banner at the bottom. We announce these new picks every single month, except for the book club. And then we have the discussions at the end of the month. We allow like 4 people on the calls. If you'd like to join, you just let us know. I am apparently all over the place with my talking. Usually I'm much more like, this is what's happening. But so our 2 monthly clubs are the monthly listening club, which you are currently watching. And then we also have a monthly movie club, which will be meeting tomorrow night at 7 p.m. We watched the movie Halloween, the 1978 John Carpenter one. So I'm looking forward to discussing that with Beckett and Ryan. So Ryan and I actually are going to watch it immediately after this. So it'll be fresh in our minds when we have the discussion tomorrow.
Nice.
Yeah, and we also have a quarterly book club. We meet every 3 months. And it just so happens that October is the month that we are meeting to discuss Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. And we'll be talking about that on Sunday at 2 p.m. That's, I think, what we decided on. There was a little bit back and forth with that. So I'm really looking forward to that one as well. It was a great read. Like I said before, if you want to join the panels for these calls, just reach out to us once we announce the picks on the first of the month. And we can get you on the call. If you aren't on the call, you can still join us live through the discussion by commenting on this. If you are watching live and commenting live, we actually see those and you can be a part of the discussion that way. If you're watching it on the replay, you can leave a comment on it. We still get notifications about that, and I will still love talking about media with you. So yeah, definitely reach out if you have thoughts, opinions, criticisms.
Yep. We also have a Patreon that if you like what we do here and you'd like to support us, you can feel free to sign up for as little as, I think the lowest tier is $2 a month. So you can join at any level. And I'll put the link to that in the chat.
Yeah, please do. We need to make a banner for it.
We should, yes.
All right. There we go. So I always like to start with this question, even though I'm pretty sure I know the answer to it. Have you guys listened to this album before?
You mean before this month? No.
Yeah, before this pick.
Before right now, yes.
Good.
Although I had some other Edgar Meyer stuff that, sort of cross-genre stuff from like 20 years ago. And I forget who he was working with at the time, but familiar with him. I mean, I'm familiar with all these guys, but that in terms of albums like this, with sort of cross-genre string music, I'd listened to something Edgar Meyer was on 20 years ago or so.
Yeah. It's a collection of just musical juggernauts over here. I think because I followed Chris Thile from when I was like a kid and he was in Nickel Creek. my mom was a huge fan of Nickel Creek, and so I ended up listening to it. And I actually listened to Chris Thile's solo stuff before realizing that he was in Nickel Creek. But yeah, I mean, Yo-Yo Ma, well-known cellist. It's always really interesting to me because he's so well known as like a classical person and so well known in the classical world that like he does a ton of like cross-genre stuff. I think the only person on this team that I'm not like super familiar with their catalog is Stuart Duncan.
The only name I knew from this was Yo-Yo Ma, and that's only because I don't like follow classical music. I feel like most people know who he is.
Yeah, he is definitely one of the, especially in the classical world, like one of the few people who's really crossed over into the lexicon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. I thought Chris Duncan was in some ensembles previously with Chris Thile. Is that right, or am I mixing him up with somebody else?
Probably. To be honest, I'm not super familiar with all of his work. Oh, okay. He actually was on the Robert Plant and Alison Krauss album, Rising Sand, which I really liked, and again, didn't know. I imagine he's one of those people who I've heard him play many, many times, but I'm not quite as good with like the names of people playing on albums as you are, Miguel.
Well, yeah. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But part of it is it used to be a lot easier when there was liner notes on LPs, and it's kind of doable with CDs. But, since then, it's really, really difficult. So I just started the habit when it was easy.
That's fair. There's also like a lot of crossover, and like you don't really, I feel like as soon as like you start to notice it, all the pieces start fitting together. But if you don't go looking for it, you just never even know that they're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuart Duncan is the fiddle player on this. But I always have to ask my secondary question of what was your favorite track? I know that this like isn't, it's primarily a instrumental album, and so in that case, like it's sometimes hard to tell them apart. But I still would like to ask.
I liked Less Is Moi and 13/8.
Yeah, I was kind of I liked, so the way I listened, there was a bunch of what I'm assuming were sort of B-sides or non-album tracks, and I really liked the classical piece.
Oh yeah, there's like a
Something Gamba by anyway.
yeah, there's like a sonata on there.
Yeah.
It's not actually
But it's
listed.
not
Yeah.
here. What's
It's
that?
it's a Bach piece.
There were 2 bonus tracks on the playlist that I listened to. But I do like the first like 5 songs a lot as well. Especially Quarter Chicken Dark. That one is very interesting.
So I listened to this album for the first time probably in like 2013. I remember being very, very upset because they actually played this album live in the January of 2012 at the House of Blues in Boston, which means I lived in Boston when they all performed this live. And I mean, to be fair, it was the end of my senior year of college, and I was in music school, which meant that I just had a lot on my plate. But I have remembered Quarter Chicken Dark this entire time. Like, it is the song that sticks in my head. Listening to it again, I also like Less Is Moi, and I kind of laughed at that because Miguel and I have had the conversation about track number 7. And it's track number 7.
There you go.
Is in track number 7 tends to be the best one?
Yeah.
Mm,
You weren't were you a part of this
I don't
discussion?
think so.
nah.
Oh, I had a discussion about how when I was younger, like I mean like when I was like a teen and like had to go out and buy CDs before streaming, I would only ever know like 2 or 3 tracks on any of the CDs. And like track number 7 was always like the surprise like one, like the one that I didn't know was there, but I ended up really, really liking.
Hmm.
And I kind of judged it as like it's like this little like dip in you start off strong, you go down. If it's an album, you want to bring the energy back up before the end. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it kind of like that number falls in the category there, but it will forever make me laugh whenever I really like track number 7.
Yeah, I mean, from a planning standpoint, it makes sense.
It's not really something that exists anymore, but especially for CDs.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting because with CDs, you got a lot more tracks. I wonder if that would hold up on albums or albums that were recorded when the LP was the media,
Right.
because you might have been done by track 7, right?
It's true. I think most albums like this one, with the bonus tracks, it goes up to 16, which is usually about where it is if it's like a Japanese CD.
Mhm.
But I think most albums like are around like 11 or 12,
Yeah, I
like
think
a
I
good
think
number.
feel like 12 is a pretty standard number.
Yeah.
What do you mean, album on a CD or album on a LP?
CD.
Yeah, yeah. On an LP, it's a lot less. One of my favorite albums is like 38 minutes total running time.
Yeah, you're talking to a couple millennials here.
Sorry.
Albums are CDs in our lexicon.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny though because I've been making my way through the 1001 albums to listen to before you die.
Oh, wow.
um, I started doing this long before I started this club. I'm actually like on 960, so I'm almost done.
Wow.
Do you guys know where the word album comes from?
I do not.
It comes from early LP. So LP stands for long play, and before that, it was 78s. And 78s literally came in a photo album things because you could fit so little music on it. If you wanted Beethoven's Fifth, there would be multiple 78s. And so this thing was like an album, right? As
Yeah,
opposed to a
Oh.
single.
Huh.
I've seen a lot of those, especially for like classical pieces.
I've
That makes a
never
lot of
thought about
sense.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
So there
but
you go. That's probably almost 100 years old right now because that LPs would have been in the 50s.
yeah,
Anyway,
the history of music, man. Um,
we should
no,
have a
but going through,
music set, one of the music things of like track 7. That's the whole topic is every track 7 that you love.
I've said this my entire life, and every single time I say it, I'm like, boy, I need to go back and actually like test this hypothesis. Or is it just that I always only notice? But so maybe I will. Maybe I'll have to go back and
It could
test
be
this
fun and
hypothesis.
random.
But the thing that I was trying to when doing like the 1001 albums to listen to before you die is just like the difference in album lengths.
Hmm.
Especially like from if it's an album that's from the 70s, it's usually like you look up the initial track listing and it will be like 8 songs, but the only versions that you can find on streaming are deluxe remastered albums that are like 2.5 hours long.
Wow. Yeah. If it's a good
So
album.
yeah, you like get all the bonus tracks. It's usually like a couple. There's a bunch of them where it's just like version A, version B, radio version of like the entire thing.
Wow.
But this album though, um, this album actually has like a really interesting backstory. Because I mean, it's a bunch of it's a bunch of very, very famous, well established, and amazing musicians who got together and I think Edgar Meyer and Stuart Duncan had worked with Yo-Yo Ma before, and they brought up the idea of bringing Chris Thile in with a project because Yo-Yo Ma actually really likes bluegrass, and he got so excited about it. And then James Taylor got very excited about it, and so they recorded this entire album in the barn, which is James Taylor's personal studio.
Oh, awesome.
And I was very confused because I listened to this on Spotify, and Spotify has the third track, Helping Hand, and James Taylor is listed as it. And I was like, is this like a rendition of a James Taylor song? And it's not. And I can find no reason why. He's just listed as one of the, despite the fact that right here it says that all of them were written by Stuart Duncan, Edgar Meyer, and Chris Thile, except for Here in Heaven, I think Aoife O'Donovan wrote lyrics and then sang the lyrics herself. But it lists James Taylor as like one of the like writers on it, and I can find no records other than the liner notes on Spotify.
Oh, wow. That's weird. She also, that gal wrote No One But You, right? I'm assuming. The other
She's
song,
not
vocal?
listed on it, but
What's
Chris,
the tune that they sing on? Isn't it No One But You?
yeah, I know that
Oh, you're just
she's
talking about
this,
who wrote it. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, already on this, because like, I mean, James Taylor's not on this album at all, so
There you go.
it's just weird.
How do you pronounce her first name again?
Aoife,
Aoife.
yeah, it's Eva, but Irish.
Aoife, but Irish.
I was gonna say, yeah, it had to be Irish with that kind of spelling.
Yeah, Aoife O'Donovan.
O'Donovan, that's a dead giveaway.
Yeah. She is also somebody who was around in Boston. She went to Boston Conservatory and I think graduated probably about the time that I was starting at Berkeley. Her band Crooked Stills was very popular and still a favorite of mine, and is also very folksy and bluegrassy.
Cool.
Yeah, as far as the songs with lyrics, I liked Here in Heaven. No One But You sounded like a Christmas song to me. And it's not like the melody and kind of just the way that it ties together more than like the lyrics, but like I don't know. It's not that I dislike Christmas. It just Christmas has its place, and that's December. And anywhere outside of that, it doesn't belong, in my opinion.
Yeah. Do you know if they recorded this before they toured it, or they toured it for a bit before they recorded it?
I imagine they recorded it before they toured it.
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. I'm just pretty sure because I know that they played in January of 2012 and this album was released in 2011. And so in my head, that is like their first performance of it because I wasn't aware of anything before that.
Yeah. This is, you can shut this down. This is hopelessly geeky, but I was really interested in the process since Yo-Yo Ma comes from a place where you only read, and everybody else, well, Edgar Meyer could be a reader too, but I'm imagining Chris Thile and Stuart Duncan grew up in a tradition where you don't read, right? And so did they write out charts for Yo-Yo Ma, or has he developed the skills to just pick up tunes by ears? Because plenty of classical musicians do not have that skill.
I don't have that skill. I've always, like, in my world, you either have people who are like visual musicians, which is how I grew up, or
mean
people,
reading.
yeah. Like my sight reading skills, great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so
if you
that's what,
play something and then have me like try to improvise, it takes me a while. If you say,
that's what
"Hey,
I was
play this
wondering.
song," it has to process for a while.
Yeah.
But Yo-Yo Ma, I think, does both.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah, I've seen him perform live, and I feel like he is very adept at just kind of improvising
I
Mhm.
think that he is mainly a classical musician, but I think his love of music goes beyond that. I know that he's played bluegrass before this album. It wasn't like this
Okay.
was his introduction to it.
Yeah,
It is
that's interesting.
interesting though that all tracks were written by everybody except him.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that may not be
So
part of his. I mean, when you're playing Bach, you generally don't get asked to write tunes. It's like, this is written, you interpret.
in my head, um, the way they did this is probably by writing out just like basic charts. So all the tracks were written and like they knew what the bass line kind of was and what the basic melody was, and then they just had the head and then just like where they were going from there.
Yeah,
That's kind of my theory of just like a lead sheet.
yeah, that was so that makes total sense to me, and it also makes total sense that it was recorded before they toured it, because I my sort of one of my main emotional reactions was I wish I had seen this live because it doesn't sound like they're maxed out, right? Tunes are
Yeah.
great. It's really cool stuff,
Oh.
but there's sort of like uh I don't know what the word is, protective coating on the music where it's just kind of we're still figuring things out as opposed to we have this nailed and we're going for it. I didn't feel a lot of we're going for it moments.
For these four dudes whose music I greatly enjoy and I know how great of musicians it is, it does feel like they got reined in a lot on this album. Like at least for like Edgar Meyer and Chris Thile, they usually have a little bit more feeling. And this does have feeling in it, but it feels a little bit more on the beat than I'm used to from them.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it
it's
could be the studio. Is this is produced? I purposely didn't look up anything because I wanted you to tell me this was a produced album, right?
Um, yeah. I mean,
Like they had like a label backing.
who produced it?
um, kind of.
Hmm.
Um, they weren't in a studio per se. Like I said, they were in James Taylor's personal studio. It looks like the producer on it was Stephen Epstein, who um, looks like he does like a lot of classical music. It probably was brought in by Yo-Yo Ma to do it, but I know that most of the actual recording work was done at James Taylor's
Yeah,
house.
only because some of the what you just said, Miguel, like the kind of pulled back and like reined in quality of it, maybe like trying to appeal to a broad audience who maybe doesn't listen to a lot of classical music or bluegrass because it feels very successful, accessible to me, coming in from not really being a fan, not necessarily not a fan, but just like those are genres I don't listen to on a normal basis. So,
Yeah, the label's Sony Masterworks, which is a classical label, so that makes
hmm.
sense that, Yo-Yo Ma had the record deal, he brought in his producer, and, yeah. Yeah, but I think that also, like, aligns with they're kinda learning the tune still, right?
Yeah.
And after a month on the road, after a dozen or so shows, I bet
Mm.
you just would have been, like, rocking a lot more.
Yeah, you could go listen to some later like live recordings.
There's a ton of stuff on YouTube of, not only on what is that? All Songs it's not All Songs Considered, the
The Tiny
NPR
Desks
Tiny Desk.
concerts. Yeah.
They're on that, and there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube of them playing, but I don't know if it's from this album or the one after it.
It's from the one after it. This album
Oh,
was pretty under wraps, but they did play it a lot. The reason I went back to the cover is because this cover here, I cleverly covered up the bottom of it where it tells you that this is from a live recording of it and not the actual album. But the image on it was pretty good. So there are like a lot of videos of them playing, and I meant to go in, and I just have not had the time to
mhm.
go in and like listen to more beyond just the album, which is a pity because I really like these guys and I really wanted to, but it wasn't I did not have the time.
Also, they just look like they're having so much fun in this picture.
Yeah.
Like I want to be in that room and part of that conversation.
I really like because they have another album out, the Not Our First Goat Rodeo. And I like the cover for it because it is just like Stuart Duncan, Edgar Meyer, and Chris Thile are like posing. And then Yo-Yo Ma's just like he didn't get the memo that they're being moody.
That tracks. Why Goat Rodeo?
There's a definition of that. Well, I think of it as the Texas thing. Goat rodeo, I think just because it's this way too much has to go right for this to work. Right? That you got total goat rodeo on your hands there, buddy. Good luck.
I've
Right?
never heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a chaotic event where many things must go right for the situation to work.
Okay.
Which was written by somebody not from Texas, but yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it seems like it was named directly by Yo-Yo Ma, which makes sense because he's the one who was just like, "Oh, I have a vague connection to these two dudes who
Mhm.
have a connection to this other guy who I greatly admire. We can put all these dudes together in a room." Like,
Yeah.
I imagine a lot of things had to happen before this was able to get going.
Plus, it sounds good, and it's got bluegrass overtones, right?
It's
It
true.
made me think of Greatest of All Time.
I thought that at first because it was a classical dude, and then I went, "Wait, it's bluegrass guys. It's a real goat rodeo." So that's these goats are like the cats of the barnyard. You
See, I
cannot
don't
get them
have
to do
a
anything.
missing context. I didn't have that to reference.
Yeah. Goats are just like
I love goats. They're so cute.
They are.
they're very cute, but man, you can't get them to do a dang thing they don't want to do.
That's why I love watching videos of them.
Oh, you know what? I have this great video. We have my day job. We have a farm on campus, and there's a big herd of goats. And the gal who runs the farm, they're in a pen during the night, and then they're let out into their outdoor pen in the morning. And she did got down about 3 feet off the ground, did a slow motion video of the goats being let out, going to the pen, and it's just the funniest thing ever. Just the ear action alone, just like. Hard to describe.
If you have a copy of that, I absolutely want it.
I would love to see that.
Yeah, it's from a few years back and on a phone, so who knows if they still have it. But yeah, goats are just like, you love them, you hate them. It's just like trust a goat to ruin any occasion.
That's fair. I wanted to ask this, and I brought it up briefly on the little blurb I wrote at the start of the month, but yeah, is it classical? Is it bluegrass? If you got this album, Miguel, where would you put it in your record store?
Well, being practical, I would just put it wherever people would look for the thing. But it's probably some of it's going to have to be in the Yo-Yo Ma section, which is classical. Some of it's going to have to be in the Chris Thile, because I don't think the other two guys are draws for your average record store person. But I don't think of it as classical so much as so on the continuum from classical to bluegrass. I think it's closer to the middle for me, or close. Oh, I'm sorry, it's closer to bluegrass. I'm doing the continuum. Hello, stay with your metaphor, Miguel. So in the continuum of classical to bluegrass, it's closer to bluegrass for me. But it's also not so. I mean, you've listened to more of Chris Thile's solo work. It doesn't seem that far from his solo work. Do you think it's really far from his solo work? Me, I'm not an expert.
I think it absolutely does fit into like his repertoire, but I mean, Chris Thile also has entire albums, especially with Edgar Meyer, where they're just like playing like concertos. So, like, I think he has like a bunch of sonatas that he does. So, like, classical is not out of the realm for him. But I definitely hear a
Yeah.
lot more of the Chris Thile influence on this album than I do anybody else.
Yeah, I think he's the alpha in the room, at least when it came to the writing the tunes. So sometimes when everybody's credited as a writer, well, not everybody except one is credited as a writer, that's more of a financial gesture
Yes.
than everybody had 33% say in the tune. So I think it's definitely he's the alpha in the room, at least when it comes to what the tunes are, how they manage the sessions. I can't imagine if Yo-Yo Ma wanted to run it, he'd be running it. But, he may have also taken a back seat just because he's kind of out of his element. But
The way that I view them writing is probably just my own knowledge of everybody here is probably Chris Thile coming up with a line and then Edgar Meyer adding something and then Stuart Duncan adding something on that. And so therefore they are all writing this tune, but it does feel like something that's definitely more Chris Thile. And I agree with you. I never even really considered this album classical. But it weirded me out because it specifically gets listed as classical a lot of the time.
well, it's because of the label and Yo-Yo. He still
Yeah.
probably sells. I mean, nothing against Chris Thile. I think if you're talking about like shifting units, that's Yo-Yo Ma,
Yes,
and that's
100%.
a label with a budget for somebody like Yo-Yo Ma.
So yeah, it always got pushed as classical. It never felt like classical. It won the Grammy for Best Engineered Album, non-classical, which to
Yeah,
me says that,
it's not classical.
it's not classical, but it topped the Billboard of classical albums.
Yeah. Well, that's a successful crossover. It's hitting both audiences. But I think since it's Sony Masterworks, their marketing department doesn't probably have any clue how to reach bluegrass folks, and they have a really good clue how to reach Yo-Yo Ma fans.
Look, I don't know how to read bluegrass folks. Does anybody?
You go
They
to a
just
festival and
yeah,
you hand out CDs in the parking lot at all the jam sessions by all the RVs.
I'm pretty sure you just play banjo outside a Tooleride. People come
Well,
eventually. I don't know.
that's an example of what I was just talking about.
Um, I don't know. As somebody who doesn't listen to bluegrass or classical music, Beckett, would you explore more?
Yeah, I would. It was really good. Like, me, I like to have ambient music on while I'm working. So it was really good for that purpose,
Yeah,
with
I bet it
the
was.
exception of the one song that had too many lyrics. Um,
Um,
but yeah, I don't know how, like, because it felt, it did, as a non-classical listener, it did feel classical aligned ish.
Mhm.
But I mean,
Another thing is even classical producers are concerned with moving units, and maybe the reason it's a little more sedate in the studio is just because the guy's saying, "You, we got to chill because we need to not scare off the classical folks with the crazy bluegrass," you know? So who knows?
sell
But
more albums that way. Yeah.
well, in this case, because it's a classical label and the guy who sells 10 times more units than anybody else is the classical guy, right?
Right.
So,
yeah,
Yeah.
you
Well,
you
and
definitely
nobody
have to
would,
push them to the front.
yeah, and nobody would look for a Yo-Yo Ma album anywhere else in the record store. And as for name recognition, like I said at the beginning, I feel like everyone knows who he is because, in the very early days of like things going viral, he was going viral as a cellist. So,
I
mm,
usually do a lot of those judgments of like who is a very famous musician based on how well the name recognition works with Ryan. Um, he's gotten a lot better. In fact, like we drove down to San Diego and he played his music, and I was like, he's learning. Um, for anybody out there that doesn't know, Ryan is my husband and he's a film guy and he doesn't know anything about music. And his knowledge of music when our relationship started was Yeah, it was nowhere. If it wasn't like comedy lyrics or parody songs.
He's up on the Word Al.
Oh yeah, I've been to a few Weird Al concerts, but Weird Al
Oh,
is also a fantastic musician. So
Yeah.
no
You have to be
qualms
to do
there.
what he does.
that's funny. What instrument does he play? Does he play accordion all the time, or does he move around?
He moves around.
Yeah, he doesn't play
He's
piano and guitar and
he's
yeah.
actually like one of the most phenomenal musicians I've ever like listened to. And he gets a ton of grief because of his parody stuff, but no, he's fantastic. But Ryan knows Yo-Yo Ma.
There you go.
Ryan does not know Chris Thile, despite the fact that I listened to him multiple times and have played entire albums. Like the Punch Brothers is one of Chris Thile's bands.
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody else is in it from this.
I don't
No,
think so.
yeah. I really like the Punch Brothers. I have a physical album of theirs in my car and have played it on occasion. And Ryan still has no idea who that is. So, Yo-Yo Ma is definitely the winner.
There you
Mhm.
go.
So classical.
Yeah.
Yeah, classical wins. But that's okay.
Yeah.
I mostly picked this album, one, because I wanted to pick something that was a little bit more bluegrass but was accessible.
Mhm.
And I thought, for the exact same reasons as everything here, if you put Yo-Yo Ma on it, it's a little bit more interesting to everybody. Yo-Yo Ma and Edgar Meyer. I thought Edgar Meyer might be a draw for Tim, who's not here.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? So another thing for the classical crossover is all of these instruments are familiar to classical people. The classical mandolin looks different, but there is a sort of, I don't want to say middle, early music tradition with mandolin.
Yeah.
But there used to be a lot more mandolin in classical than guitar. Guitar only came aboard in the last 100 years or so.
Yes, I used to play recorder at Renaissance fairs because I'm a nerd. So I am very aware of the mandolin.
But they had the classical ones, the big bowl back, right?
Yes.
The big bulbous mandolins, yeah.
Like lutes would also be like that same kind of category. They're pretty
There you go.
similar. Old school mandolins and old school lutes are very similar. Um, yeah, which is probably why Chris Thile does play like a lot of Bach specifically.
If you could, why wouldn't you?
Um,
I'm serious. It's like
yeah,
Bach is just seriously crazy. You can learn from that every day of your life till you die, and you not be a tenth of the way there. Do you know what famous rock musician plays Bach every day he plays? Once I tell you, you'll go, "Oh yeah, yeah." And
I
your
mean,
eyes will-
that's fair. I already feel like that's my feeling, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Oh, who did you say?
I said I already know that that's going to be the feeling because I feel like I know the answer and it's just blanking.
Anything,
So,
Becca?
No idea.
Yeah, it's Sting, and his
Ah,
guitars.
yeah, that makes sense.
There you
Yep.
go.
I imagine there are also a lot of metal musicians who play Bach every day.
Oh boy, there you go.
We've had this discussion before, but metal music is just really fast classical music.
Yep.
Yeah, even in my orchestra playing days, we never played Bach.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
it's not very common,
It's
especially
not a
for
big, and
orchestra,
it's not a big band ensemble kind of
because he
thing.
is church music.
Yeah.
So specifically, that's
I
why
never
he
thought of
wrote so
that.
much. Is he wrote every single week for mass, and so all
Hmm.
of his songs are for mass. But like that doesn't mean that they're not completely innovative. It's just that he had to do it constantly, but yeah, they're
Yeah.
all for religious reasons.
Yeah, well, and
They're
he's
also
working with
pretty
a
simple.
yeah, and he's working with a limited number of instruments at play. So, yeah, you
Yeah,
don't really
smaller
like
ensembles.
yeah, that's
Actually,
why a lot of like individuals practice Bach to hone their technique, like guitar players and pianists and stuff.
um, I said that this album definitely feels like it has more of a Chris Thile influence, and that's true. But now that like I'm thinking about it, and especially like the instrumentation of this album, that is, yeah, kind of weird for both classical and bluegrass. It is a middle ground there. Um, it kind of has a lot of Aoife O'Donovan on it. So
Hmm.
Oh, I thought it
sh-
was just the 2 tunes. Is there more?
no, she's just on those tunes, but I am familiar like with her solo work, and she does a lot of like traditional Irish things because she's
Mhm.
Irish. Um, but her, and I think it's just because of the instrumentation, but her initial band, Crooked Still,
Mhm.
um, she has a very, very ethereal kind of, but very clear voice. But Crooked Still is banjo, bass, cello, fiddle,
Ah,
and
are you serious?
it plays a lot more like the banjo on a lot of their stuff. Like a lot of the later stuff is more bluegrassy, but like their first album, it's very Irish banjo, which is a lot more similar to classical. And so I think because of the instrumentation, it has more of a Crooked Still vibe. And so having
Hmm.
Aoife O'Donovan's voice on it, it kind of feels more like that because the cello definitely is more grounding and like brings it back into that side,
Yeah.
which is what her music does as well.
Hmm.
It does a couple songs on this album do kind of feel like they have a little bit of a Celtic inspiration,
Hmm.
which is cool. It get the I feel like the entire album is very like when you I've never listened to any of these guys' music except for, when Yo-Yo Ma was going viral on stage. But my immediate first concern was, oh, all these songs are going to sound the same, but they really don't. There's a good variation between every single song, and they all are very individual.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a mixed genre. It's not quite any of those things. It's
Yeah,
very very middle of the road. But
very blended.
Well,
bringing
if
up
you
like the cello in it just made me think of that, and it's definitely like what backs it down so much from a bluegrass influence. Because you have
Hmm.
to play the fiddle a very specific way to match with the cello. And so it turns the fiddle more into a violin, I guess.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of um my music knowledge about so bluegrass is like funk. It was basically invented by an individual, in this case Bill Monroe, but like Scots Irish folk music is a huge influence on that. So just like heavy metal is sped up Bach, bluegrass is sped up Scots Irish folk music. So I think that's why Ireland American country music is huge in Ireland, and some people are confused by that, but country music started out as Scots Irish string band music and the blues, right? So there's a lot of overlaps that are really really interesting.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of Irish banjo. Um,
Now wait, is that like
Renan
bluegrass?
Giddin,
Is it like bluegrass banjo or like gut string banjo, fretless banjo?
um, it's fretless banjo
So that's very
is
African. That's
standard
so cool.
like kind of Irish. There's like a lot of influence over there. Do
Hmm.
you know who Rhiannon Giddin is? Is that her
Yep.
name? Yeah. She plays that style, and she does take that influence from Africa. Um, she learned banjo as like a part of that community because
Yeah,
she is
it's an
a
instrument from Africa,
yeah.
but that's
But
the
it's technically an Irish banjo, and it's so weird.
well, yeah, no, that makes total sense, but yeah. God, and then I remember being at a seminar where they talked about the connections between Scots-Irish music and North Africa, and this guy played 3 tunes. One had lyrics from the Middle East, one from Morocco, and one from Ireland, and it was just like your head just went, "Wait, there's no way," because this is like hundreds of year-old tunes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Rhiannon Giddens is like a fascinating
She's
person and
amazing.
also fantastic intersection of just like genres. Uh, for people who don't know, she's a trained opera singer. That's like what she did in college. She actually has a podcast that's all about opera, where it's her
Mm,
like explaining arias. Um,
wow,
but that's not what she's known for at all. She
I didn't
is
know that.
known primarily as I think she's generally described as like folk and bluegrass. She's put in that category, but um, she's African American and she took her knowledge of music and music history and kind of molded that back into her folk music. And so it kind of also has like this very gospel R&B,
Mhm.
Hmm.
bluegrass, Celtic because she took the banjo back from that. It's like a mixture of all of these things.
Yeah, and
And
then
it's very good. I would
and
highly
it's
suggest her.
it's taking it back to the roots. So if you think of all the earliest recordings of blues artists like Robert Johnson, the record labels, in order to more fully exploit them, only let them do their original blues stuff. But if you went to a Robert Johnson gig, he would be doing string band music. He would be doing whatever the people in the bar wanted, right? They just sort of got pigeonholed by the record label so they could steal the publishing royalties, and they couldn't steal publishing royalties if they were doing some Irish string band tune, right?
Right.
And I'm not saying that happened with every blues artist back in that day, but they all had to know a really wide variety of stuff, but they only got recorded doing their original blues stuff.
Right. It's I don't know. This is an interesting point of music history because it's a bunch of stuff getting jumbled up together and nobody really keeping notes.
You talking about
Um,
now or back then?
both
Yeah.
in general, just the history of it. So, yeah, bringing up this album that is kind of genre bending, but like still I don't know. Bluegrass definitely like feels more aggressive than any other genre.
Oh, yeah.
Like if you have any genre of music and a slight hint of bluegrass in there, it's gonna be bluegrass.
Yeah. It doesn't blend well with others. Plays well with others, not so much.
The thing is, it plays great with others. It's just as soon as like you put that in there, you play a banjo once,
Well, then
congratulations, it's bluegrass.
well, no, if you play a bluegrass banjo once, if you're doing, like, one of those fretless African banjos, that can go in a lot of different directions.
Oh, it
Because
should, but
Rihanna
again,
Giddens, she
Rhiannon
plays a fretless gut string banjo? I didn't catch that. I knew it was an open back kind of frailing style.
yeah, it's fretless.
Wow.
Um,
I like her even more.
yeah, it's really cool. She does it incredibly well. It kind of made me want a fretless banjo. Um, but she's still classified as bluegrass a lot of the time, or
Mm.
at least folk. And
Yeah, folk
it's
makes sense,
folk makes sense, but
but in a
but
2020 version of folk, right?
yeah,
Like, nobody would have called that folk in the '60s. There's no way she's getting on a folk label acting like that, but yeah.
um, this conversation took us all over the place.
Holy cat,
Um,
sorry about that, that's me.
no, I mean, it was both of us. I wasn't exactly sure how long this conversation was going to go on because I really like this album and I really wanted people to listen to it, but I don't have like a lot of insight on it as something other than genre bending and a interesting collaboration.
Yeah, well, I will say it's really fun, and if you out there on the internet are curious at all, go listen to it. It's not I mean, as somebody who doesn't listen to either of these genres, I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot to say simply because I don't know much about these people or the genre, so but it was definitely a good listen.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Chris Thile is just sort of fundamentally genre bending on his own.
He is.
nobody would say he's a straight up Bill Monroe, bluegrass picker. He can do that, but he is all over the place too. So certainly any fans of Chris Thile would love this.
I mean, I think
I don't
fans
even
of
know who
Chris.
Bill Monroe is.
He's the guy who invented bluegrass in the 20th century. Like James Brown invented funk. So they're the two guys that invented their own genre.
Listen, my favorite music to play when I was playing music was classic rock. So
When I was in college, I was a huge fan of Chris Thile's album Deceiver, but I could also see Beckett really getting into that album. Is kind of like he's all over the place. Like he comes out with an album and you have no idea what goddamn thing it's gonna be. It's gonna be
by
a
the way,
mandolin, and that's all you got.
remember in high school I played oboe. So when I was playing, my favorite music to play was classic rock on oboe.
There you go.
I was in pep band. It was fun.
The pep band had an oboe?
Yeah.
That's awesome. More than one?
No, just me.
Just you.
She's just that good.
Or no, I think there were two of us.
Oh, geez, that's a badass pep band. 2 oboes. And then did you have so it's a pep band, there's a drum set player or marching band drummers? So how did you project over that? Did they always tell the drummer to shut up? Just be quiet, can't hear the oboe.
No, I think we more or less blended in. So I mean, it's hard as an oboe to project over when you have a baritone sax right next to you. So
What? I was watching a
She meant that in the
show.
nicest way, all you bari sax people out there.
No, I get it. I was watching either a TV show or a movie, and somebody said something, but there was a trumpet right behind them, and it was like playing, and they added the music in later. And I was just looking, and I was just like, there is no way that person talking would be heard at all. As a flute player in an orchestra for many years. No, I don't know what I'm doing half the time.
Thankfully, in our pep band, we would have the woodwinds on the left and the brass on the right. So we didn't have to worry about competing with them so much or getting our ears blown out. So
So I do want to wrap this up just because we continually to get off topic, and as much as I want to continue talking about it, I do have to watch the movie Halloween. To take us in an entirely different route that is also a spark of a new conversation. Through clicking Wikipedia links continuously, I have recently discovered that amongst bluegrass, which is generally considered like Appalachian region music of the United States, but also occasionally includes Irish ballads, Scottish music. Apparently, there is Czech bluegrass. I have no idea what that is.
What do you mean, like Czechoslovakia?
Yep.
What? Awesome.
And I've never heard of that, specifically Czechia, which I have to make the distinction between because I am Slovak. But I am very interested, and now I want to really know what this is.
Wow.
So
that is so you guys know drum and fife, like the colonial marching. There's a big drum and there's the little tiny fife players. There's a drum and fife tradition in the southern states of African Americans doing that, and it's just like the best musicians in New Orleans were handed a fife and one was handed a drum, and they said, do your thing. It's just so funky, and it's the same instrumentation as to get Johnny Come Marching Home, but it's just like, oh my, I would love to hear what the Czechs did with that stuff. Because that's an Eastern European folk tradition where it's like all kinds of crazy odd meters, right?
Oh yeah, no. Yeah. Eastern European folk music is insane.
You guys have those mandolins that are triangles, the sharp ones that poke your eye out?
You're thinking of balalaikas, and that's Ukrainian and more that region. Slovakia, I don't know actually.
I'm lucky to be anywhere within a 500-mile radius of what we're talking about. But that sounds awesome.
Reading about this, you are absolutely correct. It's like one of those things of like when you get into classical music at the start of the 20th century, a lot of like Dvorak and like Bela Bartok and like those people actually like had to go back to their hometowns because all of a sudden the folk music was fascinating with its like, because there's not really a time for any of it. It's just a feeling. It's something you kind of do while getting drunk in a bar. But it seems like Czech people really liked bluegrass music and then had to face the hurdle of figuring out how to get banjos. And I'm very fascinated. I'm going to look up the history of this more.
Yeah, because I
So
mean, at
stay
its root,
tuned.
it's a handmade instrument from Africa, right? Just need a skin and some gut strings and a gourd, and you're there halfway. But yeah,
Yeah, I
awesome.
imagine when they're thinking of it, they're not thinking of the African version of it. I think they are thinking specifically of
Oh,
American Appalachian.
yeah. The
Yeah.
hyper mechanical. Yeah.
Um,
There you go.
so on that note, any final notes?
Oh, I just had like a Hollywood reference for you, Beckett. So there's a famous country artist named Dwight Yoakam who did a bluegrass album, right? And he named it after the Beverly Hillbillies. So the name of the album is Swimming Pools and Movie Stars. Is that reference over y'all's head? Yeah, it is.
I zoned out. I was looking up the history
I
of
mean,
America.
I remember seeing a couple episodes of Beverly Hillbillies at my grandparents' house when I was a kid.
Yeah, so the theme song is total bluegrass and some classical. The two guys in that band came from Bill Monroe's band, right? So they're second generation or first generation. But anyway, it was like this inside joke that he called this because he's from LA, even though he's a country guy. And his bluegrass album was Swimming Pools and Movie Stars just because of the Beverly Hillbillies. And that was Flatt and Scruggs who did that. And Flatt and Scruggs started out in Bill Monroe's band.
Huh.
Yeah, the only things I remember from Beverly Hillbillies is Texas Tea and Y'all Come Back Now here. That's it.
It's best remembered that way, I think. And the theme song. Theme song's badass.
I don't know. Yeah.
I actually
I'll
do
have to
know
look
that.
it up.
So
Oh, you know, both of those terms are in the song. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no. I wanted to double check my Bell-Laika knowledge. It is specifically Russian, but does exist also in Ukrainian history, but not specifically, which is interesting for something along those lines.
There you
So,
go.
anyways, I am still deciding what album to pick next. So I am open to suggestions, but whether or not I get anything, I will have to make that decision by the 1st. So I will be posting our next music pick on the 1st in the morning.
Awesome.
You don't have rotating genres for this like you do for the books?
Nope.
For music? Oh.
I
You
try
might
to
do that,
pick
it might help.
something. I try to pick something that's different than the last thing we did.
There you go. Well,
So I have like a list of like ideas, but like now my thing is like something that probably has lyrics.
have we done any R&B?
No, not really. No.
Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life, D'Angelo, Voodoo. There's all kinds of places you go. Jill Scott, Erykah Badu. Anyway,
Yeah.
just a thought.
Awesome. I will actually have to put that into a lot of consideration. You have some Stevie Wonder on like my suggestion list. Maybe
Oh,
we'll
might have been
finally.
Inner Visions isn't my favorite, but
It does have Tonto, which does interest me.
Inner Visions has Tano. I'm not sure Tano is still on Songs in the Key of Life. Maybe a little bit. But
you know what? This
I
is
think
something
he
that we
left
can
them by
figure
that
out.
point. There you go. Yeah, Inner Visions for Tano. All righty.
All right.
Nobody on the internet got that. Stevie Wonder's synthesizer was a thing called Tano.
Well, they'll find out about it next time when we actually get to talk about Tonto.
There you go.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Y'all come
All
back,
right.
you hear? Bye, guys.